And we are now live on. Oh, no, not the pencil. We are live now on both online. And so today we are back at it again with another episode of Eavesdrop. Um, Today you are going to be with the Black Anglo Saxon as well as
Inquisitive Q.
And today we are going to pick back up on a discussion that we were having a week, 2 weeks ago. I believe, in terms of the digital divide, in terms of how all of the things are playing out in COVID. And this one is going to segue into the overall marketplace of tech and how tech um, won't be the answer to access or equal access in the sense, if I'm correct in that representation of how we're going to move forward as a nation and globally, because as we know, we are all in a global economy at this point when we talk about our markets, and as it pertains to America, because we can't get around those things, which I'll let you get into a little bit later. Um, but before we get started, I just want everybody to make sure that you like the video. If you're joining us right now, go ahead and share that video just so that you can be able to help us in terms of algorithms and being able to have these conversations in a broader sense. Join in again, subscribe as well to the channel, please. I appreciate that. We appreciate that to help our growth in that way. But before we get started, I just want to go ahead and pass the torch in terms of framing the conversation, because this is kind of an angle that you want to kind of have a full, in-depth conversation, because I know we touched last time on it pertaining to COVID and the technological divide in terms of the redlining and not being able, or African American communities not being able to access technology in the same way, and some of the limitations that may pose now, and the residuals that it'll have in the future. But I just want to, give you leeway in terms of framing what we'll be talking about today, as it is slightly different from what we were talking about last time, but it is still involving tech. And I'll just go ahead and give you the floor.
So, hey, lovely folks, it's Inquisitive Q here. And I tapped the Black Anglo-Saxon, or the Black Anglo-Saxon, you got to put the emphasis on the Black Anglo-Saxon, to have this conversation about the digital divide. Because when we had it initially, it was really focused on the youth. It was really focused on the kids. And we had the conversation about infrastructure and how in the Red Sea, which is the rural areas of America, you don't have the infrastructure to have it. And then for broadband access. In the urban environment, you have access to it, but it falls along the lines of the historical inequities in income inequality that the urban area has. And before we get into PwC, I don't know if you want to call them a think tank, but they're more like a McKinsey group out of the United Kingdom. Before we get into the PwC article that comes up, I want to frame this conversation and I want to frame this narrative around how tech is like most things or most industries when they first brought to the Western imagination and also the Anglo-American economy, which is to say that typically non-Blacks and non-POC people get the first bite of the apple. And then we are left with the rotten core. So what I mean by that is that the high incomes that people earn from tech don't translate into Black neighborhoods. When I say Black neighborhoods at this point in time, for some people, I mean ADOS. If you know what ADOS is, and I'm not talking to you, but if you do know what ADOS is. ADOS doesn't necessarily get that Black Americans stemming from the ADOS who don't necessarily claim it also don't get access to those high income jobs because of historical inequities. And what tech poses as a fourth industrial revolution is that with this revolution, people can become invisible. So I wanted to frame the conversation around how tech, although it has its great promise to solve a lot of problems that COVID has presented, we are engaging digitally and at a distance. Zoom is now a commonplace for meetings in offices and so forth. But when we begin to talk about education in the fourth industrial revolution, which is tech, we also need to talk about the adults in the room and how technology will displace a lot of jobs and will not necessarily replace those jobs with new income or new streams of income as they come in. So we come to the pre-WC article, please.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can read the highlighted portions for me.
Perfect. And so what everybody is watching now, if you are tuning in, this is a PwC article from the UK. And so what we're looking at right now is just basically a conversation. The title is How Will Automation Impact Jobs? The subtitle being we've analyzed over 200,000 jobs in 29 countries to explore the economic benefits and potential challenges posed by automation. To your critique. In the longer term, however, the development of autonomous driverless vehicles could mean that the largest impacts are seen in the transport sector. In contrast, no sector will be unaffected by these technologies. Areas like health may be relatively less affected due to the greater reliance on social skills and the human touch.
And before you go to the next one,
Okay.
I want to contextualize that by saying McKinsey Group also came out with an article. We didn't bring it in about how automation comes in, but with the McKinsey article, you see in how the long term, and PwC talks about the long term effect of automation, is that one, let's pay attention to the phrase long term. So when you got the phrase long term, that means there's a time window there. And that's when it becomes important as ADOS or Black Americans to understand time windows and the language of this is coming up. So it gives you an event horizon in which people anticipate these things being taken over. But what's important about the transportation that goes to Uber, it goes to Lyft, that goes to trucking and freight, all of these jobs, gigs in traditional trucking, where you do actually get benefits for trucking, for Black Americans pose an existential threat to being able to economically survive. Because into the next segment, if I'm thinking about it correctly, the next segment with inside of PwC talks about the education levels as well.
Yes, and so when we get down to education and retraining, to adapting to new technologies, in short term, the impact of automation may be low for workers of all education levels, but in the long run, our estimates show that those with lower education levels could be much more vulnerable to being displaced by machines. And then we see the chart over here that breaks down the automation risk low for all education levels in the short term, which I'll let you touch on afterward. And then government and business need to work together to help people adjust to the new technologies through retraining and career changes. A culture of adaptability and lifelong learning will be crucial for spreading the benefits of AI and robotics widely through society, particularly with an aging population where we need people to be able to work for longer. Improved STEM skills will be important in allowing people to take the high technology jobs that will arise out of AI and robotics, but soft skills will be also important in making people adaptable and employable throughout their working lives. So I'm gonna go ahead and let you take it before, and I'll
go ahead.
Go on for you.
Because that this is a perfect segue into how you always talk about the social skills and talk about the community. And that's what I am always like, people don't read. And then it comes off as this elitist tone. It's like reading is an activity like walking. If you're not in the practice of walking, and I tell you, we got to walk 25 miles, the people who are in practice of walking, it's like 25 miles is a long way. I can give you 10. 10 miles I can deal with. If you saying we're going to do 10 miles in a day, I can adjust. But if you telling me I'm just not used to walking, and I can't do with I'm not used to walking. Is either you get used to walking or you get left. And that's when you get to lifelong learning. And tech is that if you don't know how to learn, because learning is a skill. If you don't know how to learn, if we don't hold our governments accountable about putting people in positions where they can learn, putting them in environments in which they can learn, we know in low income neighborhoods that there's chronic stress there, and chronic stress and cortisol levels also affect a person's ability to learn and retain information. So we're not holding our representatives accountable for what's coming ahead. Yeah, we hold them accountable for the past. We here are talk about Joe, calling Jim Crow and everything else. But if we're not holding people accountable for what's happening now and what's going to happen later, there's no redressing the past, because one of the reasons we're here is because Black Americans have been held in menial jobs, jobs that are non-managerial, jobs that have no position. We can talk about Kanye and his Adidas plea on how he need to be a part of the boards of Adidas. That's entertainment. That's not what we're on. Where I'm going to center in creating a platform for this discussion is saying this, is that we as Black Americans and ADOS, those of us who claim it, are not willing to accept that reading and ongoing learning is a part of that six-figure lifestyle. That a part of the six-figure lifestyle, that proverbial six-figure lifestyle, is about being recertified. It's about being, like they say, the soft skills, connecting with people, talking to people, and holding our elected officials accountable. Now, we can't do employment quotas. However, we'll see later on where we can talk about the discriminatory practices within tech for those who already have the skills. If we, as a population and group, are not willing to focus on that, but we are willing to focus on Cardi B and so forth, then I don't see a market player deciding that this is important, because it doesn't seem that the population that is directly affected by automation is taking automation and its threat to their ability to be inside of an advanced economy seriously.
And I hear that, and so I'll ask a few questions in terms of clarification, and then what I took from the article, and then because I like the data and the charts and whatnot. On the side we have here, it goes to women workers could be more affected by automation over the next decade, but male jobs could be more at risk in the longer term. And so I want to, continue to speak to what we aren't doing in terms of holding elected officials accountable in terms of the future when we're talking about tech. Because what happens is when we talk about the job market and we talk about how quote unquote those people navigate what it is, the job market, we like to have a positive outlook in a lot of different ways. And for myself, I think it is detrimental because, to your point, and to the article's point, in terms about how the automation coming in and affecting those lower end, or quote unquote what we would call right now during COVID, the essential employees, if I understand correctly, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about grocery store workers, or we talk about workers who are doing the entry interfacing. So what I mean by entry interfacing, for people who are watching, is when you go into McDonald's and you have that server or that person who's taking your order. I've been in some McDonald's now that have adopted the mechanism to go in and you can place your order on like a tablet of a sort, and you don't necessarily have to have that interaction with the person. So I do, in a lot of senses, in a lot of ways, have thought about how that looks as me being a more political person. I don't necessarily have the answers to the tech portion as of yet, as of now, because it's not something that I've thought about it, but I haven't dove into it to the extent that I see how this is and can play out bad for us in terms of groups specifically, but also as the whole larger society when we talk about trying to solve a lot of familial interpersonal relationship issues, and just things that require that person to person in face interaction when we talk about the tech industry, and then not being a cure all and a fix to all of the things that we're doing right now currently. What I can say to the public is that I do think that people should focus while we hold them accountable for the things that they have done in the past. Is the things that are going to be done or occur in the future. Because I do think that we don't necessarily factor that in terms of a lot of the conversations that we're having right now with job insecurity, high unemployment rates, especially amongst the African American community. I just saw a study recently where they were talking about, well, not a study, but a report basically, where they were talking about the unemployment rates nationally decreasing, but that rate decreasing because of white people were getting back into that marketplace, but it, like you said, is not necessarily translating into the same things for us, because you also have to have access to the amenities that are quote unquote technology, like iPads, Wi-Fi. All of those things aren't necessarily rights and heavily accessible to everybody. So when we talk about a person who can access those type of jobs, and not only access those type of jobs, but be competitive in those type of jobs, we have to have a larger conversation around, you know, how are we spreading across the spectrum, people being able to quote unquote access what we're calling the future.
Yeah.
Because that's what a lot of people propagate it to be. I don't necessarily agree. I know a lot of people have a lot of different, models based on trying to bring African Americans or underserved communities into employment through tech. And I don't know how sustainable that is, if you can speak to that in terms of the sustainability of bringing people into employment through tech, if we're having a conversation about how automation is going to change that.
We good?
Yeah, we good.
Okay. Everyone, I don't care. I know y'all freaked out too when I heard that sound. Everyone freaks out. Oh, my screen.
Your phone dropped.
Oh, my screen. To your answer, that's one of the things about tech that we have to have a conversation with, is that when we went from mules, or I should say, when we went from human power to steam power, you still needed somebody to shovel coal.
Mm-hmm.
When we went from the elevator person, you still needed security. What tech has the potential to do, and it's not just lower middle class jobs or lower class jobs or working jobs. We get into professional jobs as well when you get into AI. The sustainability portion about it, and this is why Andrew Yang came out with the dividend, is that, or people
Which dividend?
The freedom.
The UBI?
Yeah, UBI, universal basic income.
Gotcha.
Why people are looking at the universal basic income, when I say people, I mean mostly sociologists, economics, anyone who has to deal with a population, is because tech is so disruptive, I don't need you anymore. And so when we're talking about lawyers and paralegals being replaced because algorithms can find better case law and make better arguments because they're able to just search data at a rate that humans cannot, so it's more efficient for the firm to offset that. Going back to McDonald's, I don't have to pay health benefits for this machine. I don't have to make sure that the machine shows up on time.
So can I ask a
Go
question?
ahead. Of course.
Are you talking about the commodification of the process? And what I mean by the process is, are we having a conversation right now about the commodification of what it is to be human and the experiences that you bring to the table, along with the capacity of what human beings do as it relates to tech? Because we both know tech and motherboards and all those things are birthed out of the human brain.
Yeah.
But you're having a conversation in which you're trying to get people, from what I'm hearing, to understand is the rate at which you can't compete with AI.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
And to clarify, to be raw with it, let's just go raw. Your labor doesn't matter. I don't need you. If I am thinking as a person who owns a firm, I am the first employee. We talk about this all the time. If I own a firm, I am the first employee. If I can't afford to pay 3 and 4 employees, then I can't afford to pay myself. And that's how an entrepreneur or a person who is in business has to think, is that people are on the balance sheet. Their income, their salary to them is an income, to you is a debt.
So you have to justify your price, and the machine, you don't have to pay.
I don't have to pay. Not only do I not have to pay, there's so many things around it. What I'm saying is that the fourth industrial revolution, unlike other revolutions, had the potential to make the poor invisible. Because COVID has made the case for non-contact delivery. Mm-hmm. So if people are comfortable with non-contact delivery, then I don't need a person to go the final steps. They call them the final steps. Meaning that an autonomous vehicle, there's going to be a case for an autonomous vehicle coming to your house, and then for the autonomous vehicle coming to your house, an autonomous robot coming from that vehicle to your doorstep, or however they will get there, to your apartment complex to deliver the goods to you. And I say it all the time with Amazon. I know y'all see it. I know you see it. You see the Amazon Prime vehicles, but you don't get your mail. So you can order a toy better than you can get your own ballot. And that's where I'm at with it. And I'm going to say it again. You can order a toy better than you can get your own ballot.
One-day delivery.
One-day delivery for your toy, but you got the 45th, Donald Trump, the president, holding United States the Postal Service hostage because they don't want to have ballots delivered to people. But what I'm getting to with the electorate is that the electorate needs to understand that business owners within their community and politicians within their community owe no true intrinsic promise to them. And what I'm trying to get people to understand is that in democracy and inside of governmental systems, who makes the decision are the active players. If you're not an active player, people aren't going to consider you. So
it's true. And because I think that's very, very important. Can you define active play? Please define active players.
I will define active player.
Because I think that's a very important point.
I will define activity. Activity is the participation of, the observation and critique of activities or behaviors that happen within a community. An active player is a person who either observes, critiques, or participates in the decision-making of their community. So a lot of people don't think that business people are part of the community. They are, because business people do not own armies, they do not own militaries. So they need protections. And that's where policy comes in, that's where tax policy comes in, that's where education policy comes in, because for a person who owns a business, I look at regulations as one, barriers and constraints, and for some businesses, I look at them as expenses. If I have to go through an extra process because the FDA requires me to go through an extra process, or the Labor Department requires me to go through an extra process to get something done, I want to forego that because the money comes in, get the product, getting to people as fast as possible without as many barriers. And because, again, with the other revolutions, people who didn't have ownership, who didn't own anything, they can leverage their labor to get the ruling class, the upper class, the bourgeoisie, the owners to listen to their appeals. But with the fourth industrial revolution, with tech, with automation, I don't give a damn what you gotta say because I can make my bread without you.
And so it's interesting. I just want to insert a
Go ahead. Always cut me off.
A little dub right there, because that's real interesting.
Always
We talk
cut me
about
off.
the leverage of labor,
Leveraging the labor.
And we Gilded Sages.
Yeah.
We talk about the Gilded Era a lot. We talk about the early 20th century, late 19th century,
mid 19th for me,
a lot, right? In terms of how the labor, and even when we talk about boomers in those transitional areas where labor became a leveraging tool, and you had access to the economy based on your labor. And so when we look at before the Gilded Era of America, and we look at now, and before the Gilded Era being slavery in America, and now we come down to this very interesting dynamic where we're seeing AI being used to not necessarily create new slaves, but again, leverage that free labor, right? And so it puts human persons in a predicament where, I was listening to Robert Wright the other day, and they were having a conversation about capitalism and how labor is undermined in this predicament, and used to quail a lot of political discussions, a lot of political arguments where we talk about whether it be Medicaid for all, whether we talk about it being a lot of these ideals that come out of what people will call the radical left, in terms of moving institutions in a way that it is fair and equitable. And what I hear from you in this conversation about looking outward and tech not being the savior that we thought, I hear it. And my question to you is, if tech is not the savior, because a lot of people are going to have an issue with that, because a lot of people have invested in tech heavily. My question then becomes, where do we move and how do we move around the tech?
Where do we move and how do we move around tech? You know what? I love that because Megan Smith, a former CTO, Chief Technology Officer, always talks about how people with tech, not tech without people. And what I mean by that is, what I take from her saying that is that we have to catch people up. The 20th century did not require the same level of intellectual burden as the 21st century promises. At a certain point, remind me what your point was, because the impact of what you said was heavy.
Because I want to understand and how we navigate around the tech, because tech isn't the answer. So we have to go ahead.
You can't. And the reason why I say you can't is because technology has always been one of those things that Black Americans, ADOS, African Americans have always had to contend with. We even have a story. Was it the dude with the hammers going through the
I know exactly. I forget his name.
We built the railroads. Alfred Chandler Jr. can tell you about it.
I forget the name of the actual machine.
Douglas Blackman, Slavery by Another Name, can tell you about the power of railroads and convict leasing and the chain gangs in 1945. That's the second white paper, Social Capitalism. Or social capital, not social capitalism. What I'm talking about with tech is that the social capital is not necessarily there or has to be there. The human capital in tech is smaller because with AI, you're able to do the managerial task of anyone that has a routine task. So let's take the paralegal, for example. The paralegal basically searches for case law. If I have an algorithm that can do that, I don't need the paralegal anymore. So we all know that law firms are basically businesses that specialize in protecting people or arguing for people within the legal framework of America. If I, as a lawyer who's starting out, have to spend, let's say I have to spend spend 5 figures, because I'm not gonna give any number. I gotta spend 5 figures to open up my firm. Although I just spend 6 figures basically trying to get here. I'm not going to be looking for taking on another person. So you can't navigate around tech because you have active participants, market players who look to tech and who look to AI to solve those clerical tasks, those small tasks that most people most Black Americans or ADOS within inside of an institution really fill those positions. It's like you're not filling a position where you are a supervisor or your work is non-linear. Most of the time, we're simple workers. We do simple tasks.
Process.
It's all of it's process. None of it is really cognitive. And because it's not cognitive, there is no true, I don't want to say training because training isn't a proper word. There's no true culture for cultivating cognitive skills. So like when we go to the PCW, you don't have to bring it up again, but they talked about men jobs in the long term being taken away. That's because most of men's jobs are technical. Men don't technically, on average, interact with people face to face. Men rather deal with things than they deal with people.
I agree.
And because technology is the matter of things and not the matter of people, those social skills that are being needed to be in a post-tech world, not post-tech as tech doesn't exist, but tech being everywhere, ubiquitous. In a post-tech world, you have to fill in those gaps that tech don't fill in. And that's mostly emotional understanding and competence of other people. So if you don't have any emotional understanding and competence of other people, whether you are a lawyer or whether you're pushing the broom, you're at risk because there's someone out there who's figuring out how to code a machine to automate your job. That even includes security. It's like you're not protected because your job is high risk. There are high risk jobs in which you can lose your position because someone out there is thinking, I know how to do this better. Again, we don't talk about the guy who lost his job or the woman who lost their job because of the elevator button. We just press the elevator button. We don't give a damn that somebody used to have that job. But again, I say this about
On the traffic light.
On the traffic light. We as a community have to begin to understand. We have to hold our electoral representatives responsible for what these active participants, they call themselves business leaders, do with technology that we built under the Defense Department in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Let me ask you this, though.
Go ahead.
Because you know me.
Mm-hmm.
My cynicism and being and moving around.
Huh? So you already know I'm cynical.
Just being around, because, and you know, being in politics, you know, don't nobody give a fuck, right? And so what happens is, I would love for business people to be cognizant of, you know, the things that they do with tech and how they navigate tech and how they're going about balancing out job displacement and, like you said, using tech with people and not just as a means to replace people.
Mm-hmm.
But we always talk about playing a game. We always talk about politics in terms of, we know the world that we want, but in the world that is, in terms of people trying to meet that bottom line of profit, I just don't see people giving two dangs about, because more on the other side of it is, look, I'm trying to start a business. Everybody's trying to be an entrepreneur, quote unquote, right now. Whether you're talking about people who come from abject poverty, whether you're talking about the middle class American who has a little bit of social capital and trying to pivot away from what he feels like is corporate dogmatism or whatever people feel like exists. You have this whole influx of people trying to be entrepreneurs in that way that I don't really think that we've ever seen before, in the way that entrepreneurism is being open to all because of tech. And with that being said, people are I feel like using it in a reckless way, in a way to undermine what would be a very person-to-person relationship. Because with the invention of technology and social media following technology, you have the barriers of communication that have, been eroded. So people are less likely to even want to go through that process of having to touch people in that way, because that's not a thing that is, wanted. I like it. I like having conversations with people. I like talking to people. I get something out of that last step because I want to hear how that person or see how that person and what they think, because I get something from that and I can move on that. But in most cases, people just do things out of the economic value of it. Um, and with that being said, for me, I don't see the trajectory changing in a way or people getting ahead of it, whether it be the elected, because I think part of the reason people don't hold the elected accountable is because a lot of people want to be the rich or the quote unquote elected. And so with holding them accountable, they would have to hold pieces of themselves accountable in terms of wanting to use the technology for an exploitative manner. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I get you.
It's an interesting dynamic that we have here.
It's not to cut you off, but it's the subject matter experts like Thomas Piketty. I don't know if I'm saying it right. He talks about capital in the 21st century. It's a Netflix. It's on it. You can see it, and how Thomas Piketty talks about the New Deal and having high taxes on capital, and how when you let capital run away, capital will often and always create inequality. And then you also have the social dilemma. I forgot who the social dilemma was done by. If you know who the social dilemma was done
by, that's
that
new Netflix.
It was a Netflix joint as well.
I saw that. I watched that. That was good.
It's about that, but it comes down to it. I'm listening to people who I listened to an economist podcast the other day, Money Talks, and people in hospitalities, and this is what really brings me down to it. Retail and hospitality is showing me that there will always be a human connection. People need people. We're not machines. We like that interaction. We have to. But when you look at Gen Z, with Generation Z is
Jeff Orlowski, the social dilemma.
Okay, Jeff Orlowski.
Director.
He's the director, but I wasn't too interested in the director.
Oh, you was interested in what part?
Just mention it.
Oh, okay.
Because again, I'll say this to the audience. I don't expect you all to give a damn about anything I say. I just hope that the way I say it and deliver it piques your interest enough that you go look for yourself. Inquisitive Q, that's how I got here. But my whole point is that subject matter experts are always talking about this. They're always talking about the human connection and what can potentially fall down. And they talked about, especially Thomas Piketty in Capital, how people are under this guise that they'll be rich one day. And I forgot who said it, that we tell people that they're millionaires in waiting. It's like most people who become millionaires don't become millionaires until their 50s. One. Two, it takes a lot of social connections, a lot of networking, a lot of technical know-how to make millions of dollars pre-tech. Post-tech, and this is one of the most important things about post-tech. When tech is just a part of everybody's life, the distance. You don't have to travel no more. Travel is such a huge part of our social interactions. Traffic, commuting, metro. You have to learn how to be a part of a community. You have to learn how to be a part of a school system, in a school environment. You have to learn how to be a part of a workforce. Why? Because you're physically in a space. But when we take tech and you're no longer physically in a space, you stop learning how to be human. Why? Because you're no longer engaging with other humans. You're engaging humans via a screen. We don't have to make it anything because we know kids will go like, this is a screen. I can do whatever I want to right now. And let's remove it and go like, that's millennials' problem. That's Gen Z problem. Gen Xers, phones.
Hey, you see now they make it mandatory in some cases for people to
Had a camera on.
yeah, you gotta have your camera on and well not your mic, but your camera on so that people can see what you're doing because a lot of people were getting pinged because you disconnected because like you said, you don't have to be connected. Like I can go onto a call and turn off my camera and turn off my what do you call it, microphone. And I saw a meme that was really freaking funny that it was talking about how, you know, in 2020, this is how you ditch school.
You wake up, you log in, and you just boom.
And you just turn off the camera, you turn off the mic, and you doing what you doing, but you present, quote unquote. And that connection is super, super lost. But I wanted to move you forward in terms of, you know, this is an article that I'm about to bring up now. Is tech was supposed to be the great equalizer, and it's from
Northwestern, I believe.
Yes, Northwestern, and I forget the name. I think it's the merger, or it's one of those things. But what we're gonna get into though is this is another article where when I read off there are national organizations like Black Founders and Blacks in Technology advocating for more representation of Black people in the tech industry and offering supports to entrepreneurs and future entrepreneurs, including grade school children. Thomas said that entrepreneurs aren't the only who benefit with more inclusive visions of lending and hiring. In fact, he said it lacks of diversification that leads to companies collapsing.
Mm-hmm.
According to CD Insights, less than 1% of venture capital funded tech businesses were owned by African Americans. Less than 1% of venture capital funded tech businesses were owned by African Americans.
Mm-hmm.
It's a problem that Thomas experienced firsthand. African Americans, and this is according to Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, make up less than 5% of the technology industry's workforce in Silicon Valley, and the percentage of African Americans that occupy executive positions in the industry may be as low as 1%, according to the commission. And independent entrepreneurs have it just as bad as those already established in the sector. Black entrepreneurs face serious problems in their professional careers that their white counterparts do not. Most important is securing funding for their business ideas.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna jump in right there.
Go ahead. It's on you.
And I jump in because in the Black American community, the ADOS community, you call me astute, I get bougie and everything else. It's just like if you're not panicking about the lack of information given to you, I don't think you understand what it means to be ADOS. Like if you're not panicking about how decisions are being made, I don't think you understand what it means to come from a history of slaves. And what I mean by that is that with venture capital, it comes about people believing in you, in your character, in your credibility. So you have Northwestern, a very respected institution, that's saying that someone who's in the tech space, who's an entrepreneur in the tech space, and if you read the article, you'll see that he does well with his revenues, saying that it's a struggle. It's a struggle to get funding from VCs, venture capitalists. It's a struggle to get grade school kids engaged in it because we just don't have the mentorship. We don't have the human capital to facilitate the social capital to build a pipeline that allows for us as ADOS, if you claim it, Black Americans, to move into the 21st century, which is tech as a job. At that, not even at the executive level, just being in the workforce. And so why that's important to me, you know, I'm huge on social capital, is that someone and some child in some neighborhood is being the new Steve Jobs, is the new Bill Gates. is because they're introduced to the technology and the problems with the technology while they're young in grade school. They have the years to learn how to solve problems and have a sophisticated understanding of the tech world. But if you, as we often do, have to wait until business events so much that it becomes pop culture, then we have to wait until it becomes credentialized inside of schools, go into this huge debt to get the credential, then come out of the school with the credential without the job opportunity.
So by that point, if I'm understanding correctly, by that point, the gut of it has already been taken out.
It's gone.
It's like
it's not hot no more.
Yeah, it's like people who try to, go and get stocks and all of those other type of things, or the Bitcoin situation once it became popular, because again, Wall Street done already hit it, the big players done already chewed it up. So by the time like you said, it becomes popularized and it hits the mainstream, you are dealing with the exoskeleton, or what a lot of people would refer to it as crumbs. You get the crumbs.
You lucky if you get goddamn.
Yeah, and because I want to
go ahead.
I wanted to just. It's crazy because it says less than 1% of venture capital funded tech businesses were owned by African Americans, and I don't think when we hear the word 1%, like how abysmal that is. Horrible. And then, like you said, going to the social capital, as we always talk about social capital, it's pretty disgusting to the point that when you talk about, because it's one thing to start a business. Let's have an honest conversation. It's one thing to start a business, right?
It's one thing, yes.
But it's another thing to be competitive in that said business. And I think where we as a group get it confused is that just because we start a business doesn't make it competitive. And bringing it around full circle in terms of COVID, in terms of the conversation that we're having about the lack of access to capital, the lack of access to infrastructure, the lack of access to social capital, because again, this is a continuation of a conversation when we're talking about the digital divide. Part 2, if you weren't here for the first one, go back, watch that Digital Divide Part 1, where we were talking about it from a more of a average person standpoint, and how the schools and how the global community and the global market and Huawei and us being in COVID and the chipsets and the trade deals and all of those things affecting how we are able to even access the hardware portion, because we have to build these, infrastructures of tech. We have to build the motherboards and all of these different things where we can come in and we can distribute Wi-Fi. That was the conversation that we had in Digital Divide Part 1, right? Now we're talking about African Americans not having just access to bare minimum. I'm looking at this, oh God. And then we talk about, like you said, when we talk about Silicon Valley, and we're going to get into it in the next article, where we talk about the tech giants have already won.
Yes.
We having an antitrust conversation, which I appreciate in a lot of different ways. I've been calling for people to have antitrust conversations. But
it doesn't make people poor. Some people get richer.
Some people get richer, and a lot of people love to talk about the existential crisis of Donald Trump. But I think, the existential crisis of monopolies having extracted what was necessary for them to maintain their monopoly status, whether or not, because, I believe in the conglomerate monopoly in the sense that they don't have to be one entity at this point.
Like the Carlyle Group.
When we talk about Silicon Valley is made up of different parties. We're talking about Google, we're talking about Apple, we're talking about Microsoft. At this point, we now talking about TikTok, maybe Zoom in the future based on what COVID has done. You're talking about a small few and going back to their history in terms of having conspiracy conversations and what do we want to call it? The technical term of shaving people's incomes and us sitting in a room.
Talking about Elon sucks.
No, not even Elon Musk by himself, but in terms of us as the Silicon Valley community sitting down and putting caps on whether you are coming in as a program analyst and us, you Microsoft, I'm Apple, saying that we not paying people over 80,000. If you as Apple pay somebody over 80,000, you have breached the contract.
Sort of like
Silicon Valley
formal thing.
Yeah, and so that being reported on, that having been a thing that has leaked into the mainstream community, that we know that that's a thing. And then on top of, I'm reading now, African Americans make up less than 5% of the technologies industry workforce in Silicon Valley. And that's when we talk about, quote unquote, Black excellence and actually making it and being able to be not just in the tech industry, but being competitive in the tech industry. I think it is disgusting to a point that you mentioned earlier of not holding people accountable when we were at the crossroads. Because I think right now we're on the other side of the crossroad when we talk about tech.
I'm listening.
And I say that because, like I mentioned, I don't see a fix to it until we come to the aftermath of and destruction of what it will do to employment in America.
Yeah.
And I don't think we'll have that conversation until, because I see a lot of people still trying to push it through as the thing to be and the way to go about it. Because I've had, and again, this is from what I've seen and touching people want to have a conversation around coding and, you know, it being a new, like you said, popularized thing and all of them. And again, I'm not mad at it. I'm not, you know, trying to shame people. Learn coding, learn all of those things. Please increase your repertoire. Because again, I'm not, you know me, I'm not against anybody increasing their knowledge base.
I'm not either.
If you want to do that, go about it the way that you want to. But I think we have to have a real and more genuine conversation around, like you said, is that the way to survive in an America that is going to be globalized, one? And when we talk about these tech jobs, and we talk about, like we were having a conversation about Huawei and the telecommunication services, a lot of those jobs are outsourced. So when we talk about tech, we have to talk about outsourcing too, because a lot of the large tech companies, whether it be how they're producing their products, because we talk about Apple, we had to talk about China, we got to talk about the chipsets, we got to talk about LG, and we have to talk about all of those different
supply
things.
chains.
Exactly. And who's encompassed in that? Because, like you said, now we're having a conversation at the bottom rung of it. We aren't even talking about providing Americans as a whole with those jobs, let alone African Americans. Americans in general are not getting those jobs.
Perfect example, TikTok.
Yeah, no.
We not even, you talking about the infrastructure, we talking about hardware, like you got the pro in your lap or whatnot. We talking about hardware that physically requires something. When we start talking about apps, we're talking about software. That requires someone who has acquired a certain amount of understanding, a certain amount of quote unquote intellect to code in a program on the other side. This is what I mean. Like PIFs, Presidential Innovation Fellows, I love having conversations with you guys. PIFs are civic tech, and it's basically tech for the people. It's basically really intelligent people who come from the private sector going like, we need to make sure that tech is for everyone. Mm-hmm. And having conversations with PIFs, you begin to see how much of this stuff is about social status. This is the problem that people have, is that they believe that only ADOS and Black Americans are obsessed with social status. No. ADOS, Black American, human, baby. European, human, baby. Everybody, human, baby. If you can use my heart, if you can use my organs, you are human. And given that you also fall prey to social conditioning. And going back to the whole thing about CEOs and they getting together and talking to each other, not paying each other certain ways, it's like they didn't each have a pocket. You don't think they don't sit around and talk to each other? They talk to each other. They have to talk to each other. That's one of the things that we have to get into is that they're CES, consumer, what is that? Consumer something? Electronic something? Well, there are expos, there are consumer things, there are festivals, there are conferences. They see each other. They have to worry about telecommunications. They have to worry about satellites. They have to worry about defense. I'm talking about those at the top. But when we start talking about tech, we also need to start talking about apps. And TikTok is an app in which we all know in the popular, if you follow the news, Donald Trump has banned TikTok. Technically, we recording today, Saturday, September, what's today's date?
Here's on the 17th.
You read the 19th? Yeah, we're recording September the 19th. Technically tomorrow, Sunday, September 20th, TikTok is supposed to be banned unless Oracle comes in and handles the privacy section. What is important about that is that TikTok is a subsidiary of a larger company in China, going back to your whole thing about being a global workforce, is that if you don't have the skills in the skill sets or people who have the skill sets within your social network, then they're just not going to have the access. And again, with tech, though, we have to talk about scale with tech. Tech has the ability to have a large scale with a low workforce presence. And what I mean by that is that the taxi cab commission couldn't have a bunch of taxi cabs out there without taxi cab drivers. With Uber and Lyft, we can have a bunch of drivers, but do Uber and Lyft really own any cars that they have to maintain? Do Uber and Lyft outside of California have to recognize people as employers? And that's where the little 1099 is coming in. And that's where everybody, and I mean everybody, I'm not just jumping on tech, I'm jumping on governments, state, local, federal. They're exploiting the workforce by saying, well, you're an independent contract, going back to the entrepreneurship for everybody. They're letting you believe that you're an entrepreneur because you can do your own thing. When everybody who really, really has a job, most likely at this point in time has a compensation package, has days off, benefits. I'm talking about outside of the government. Benefits, these people who can afford to be at home. They have their tech jobs already. They come from capital, so that when they come from capital, they're able to go into new markets of capital because they already had the skill sets. They're already there. And so when we talk about these tech CEOs, to bring it back to tech, when we're talking about these CEOs, we need to be talking about not just the Facebooks, not just the Googles, not just the Alphabets. We need to start talking about third parties inside these app stores, because we know inside the third-party app stores, Apple is notorious for stealing tech from their third-party developers. And we also need to talk about startups who also don't employ African Americans and Black Americans, who become these big unicorns that fail. So when we really talking about the 1% of executive bodies, and this is Kanye is in my head, it's so funny. He's just screaming like Jesus. But Kanye always, in his madness, has a point.
Yeah, unfortunately.
It's so unfortunate. It's like, I need you to shut the fuck up for a second. But okay.
Before you go ahead, because I want you to continue. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to, for the people, I wanted to bring this in because this is from the Los Angeles Times in terms of what we were talking about. The technical term is poaching.
Gotcha.
So this is from like 2015. The federal judge had approved a $415 million settlement that ended a lengthy legal saga revolving, allegations that Apple, Google, and other Silicon Valley giants conspired to prevent workers from getting better job offers. The case focused on no poaching pact prohibiting Apple, Google, and other major employees from recruiting each other's workers. And lawyers for the employees argued that secret agreement illegally suppressed the wages of the affected workers. So again, I just wanted to say that because we not making stuff up. And to your point, before I go ahead and let you continue, I was reading an article where they were talking about how Apple and I believe Amazon had courted, some new tech innovators, app innovators into, a business meeting and then took those business ideas and commodified them, for themselves. And that was just crazy because, like you said, how do you even fight something like that when you had when you had a calcified wealth of a...
You can't afford that. Anybody sitting here, you can write it in court, they will drain you out on legal fees. They will literally let you go into debt with legal fees. And ain't no lawyer, even if they're getting $1/3 of $1 billion, going to spend half their career chasing down no tech firm. No one's going to spend 10, 15 years in litigation back and forth because they are a small firm arguing against massive firms who have massive paralegals and lawyers that come from some of the top schools. They got people interning to fight your little small case. You're not winning. And that's when people need to stop kissing the ass of CEOs and getting to the point of, you're dicking me. You robbing me. You taking me over. Oh, so y'all want to play that game, do you?
You want the fat schlong or the little watch?
Exactly. You got to get around, Mark Zuckerberg, he don't know this. Mark Zuckerberg is no different than a thug to me. Mark Zuckerberg is no different than someone out here peddling coke to me because he's hipping you to dopamine. How many people in tech got to start their own nonprofit talking about how addictive it is? How many studies out of South Korea got to be suppressed because kids are addicted to gaming? How do we not talk about how gaming on the phones is overtaking gaming on the consoles? We don't have real conversations about how pervasive tech is. And that's what the social dilemma was about. How pervasive tech is to our life and how Mark Zuckerberg, a thug, Elon sucks, a thug, aren't held responsible for the products they put out on the street. But you want me, and this is what we need to get into it, you want Big Pharma to be responsible. So Big Pharma is responsible for antidepressants that you, Instagram, created. You, Instagram, allow users under the age of 18 who are highly susceptible to these social impressions on your app because it's all about growth. You want to grow, but you don't want to be held responsible the same way Big Pharma is held responsible because someone in Big Pharma gave the child an antidepressant or they produced an antidepressant that you created on your side tech because now this child has a dopamine problem. They have a serotonin problem because they're not getting the same level of likes. They're committing suicide. So it's like, let's not act like tech doesn't have a responsibility to hold the products they put out here. If I'm going to go out here and tell little Ray Ray, you need to stop selling weed, you can't sell K2 because it's harming people. We're going to say marijuana is a Schedule 1 drug, although we allow in Colorado, Washington, and other states where it's recreational legal, especially Michigan, for it to be essential business, while we still got people in jail for nonviolent offenses due to marijuana. Let's not talk about how white America loves to come behind black America and take what we do in the gray market, innovate it, stamp it, and say that you always did it. No, let's go back. Let's not make it race. Let's not say how affluent people like to come behind poor people who have to innovate to make the shit like it's new. You ain't new. You ain't special. You not that intelligent. You don't like me? Simple. Chris Hedges already said it. Like I said, y'all not this. Chris Hedges, you talking about when he got kicked out of the New York Times because they don't like intellectual people working for them? And how people like careerism? And how people like to do and say themselves, but they want to be the main ones. I have a Benz. I drive a Bentley. I have 6 figures.
You telling me social justice warriors out here fake?
No. I'm telling you the people who call the people social justice warriors are the honest ones. Social justice warriors aren't even fake because they don't even know what they're talking about. You have to literally be in the space, and I'm going to say it to the camera. White middle class and upper middle class people who have never been in a shootout, never seen a dead body on the ground, have never had to deal with the trauma of living in the inner city, you have no clue what you're protesting for. You do not protest for me. You have never had the emotional stress of having to see some of the things I have seen. You don't know what PTSD is. You don't have no clue when you say Black Lives Matter, what you are saying matters because you don't want to listen. You don't have to listen to me. Malcolm X will tell you that. Martin Luther King will tell you that. And any white historian who ever looked at white abolitionists and were honest will tell you that white people are not concerned with the well-being of Black people. You don't like me saying that? Look at Dr. Henry Louis Gates Jr., Stony the Road Reconstruction, and he'll tell you that. I believe it's in chapter 3. So as I was saying before I really entertained myself, we need to start looking at these CEOs and hold these CEOs accountable for what they're doing the same way we do in other sectors. It's highly irresponsible that we will hold.
Hold on.
Go ahead.
You just said that.
Yeah, I gotta rip you. You gotta get ripped. You gotta get ripped.
No.
And here's why you gotta get ripped.
Silence.
All right. They need to get ripped. They need to be ripped. They do.
Because they're complicit.
They're worse than complicit. They're aggravators of it. You mean to tell me that Germany can hold the executives of VW, Volkswagen Group, responsible for cheating on emissions? People have to literally buy the car. You have to be able to have enough money to buy a car. You don't have to have that much money to get access to an app that can literally change your brain chemistry. You don't have to have access to that. We want to hold executives on Wall Street accountable for people buying houses and mortgages that we all know that they couldn't afford. But we don't want to hold accountable people who literally know that they're programming and releasing products that are accountable to drugs.
Hold on.
They're accountable to drugs.
Hold on. So what you're saying is Steve Jobs, when he said he didn't allow his kids to play or touch any of the Apple products that he invented himself, are you telling me he knew that they were drugs? Is that what you're saying?
I am saying.
Are you accusing Steve Jobs of inventing a drug and keeping his kids from not using the drug?
Hey, I'm doing ASMR, right? Everybody. I'm saying Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Tim Cook, anyone in the tech community who has built a software device, a hardware device, or a software app knows how addictive it is. And they also know that it's really hard to break these habits. And because they know this, they know that they are creating a drug that is no different from big tobacco. If we attack big tobacco, if we attack big pharma because of the way it affects our bodies, we also need to attack big tech for the way it affects our bodies.
I can't help myself. You know,
when it comes to what?
I gotta drop in the politicals a little bit, you know, because they out here posturing. I want to hear your opinion on it, you know, because I be seeing out here
politicians
posturing, faking, talking about they gonna hold Mark Zuckerberg accountable and do all of this shenanigans. I want to hear your take on it because we're gonna get to it in the next article about how big tech already won. I just want to hear though. Well, before we get into it, do you think that they real? Do you think that they can really bring them and strangle them in?
America has been downgraded to a failed democracy because we don't have true sovereignty. This is what I mean. Henry VIII wouldn't tolerate half of the things that these tech people are putting out there. What a tech person needs to understand is that you're a noble. Let's go to feudalism because we're under digital feudalism. You are a noble. You do not command armies. You do not command militaries. You are not generals. You are not trained to be generals. You are not trained to engage people. You are a noble. So you fall underneath the sovereignty of the United States of America, which is protecting you technically right now from the Europeans who want to tax that ass heavily, especially the French. So when I come back to when I say these nobles, these tech nobles don't want to be touched, and Henry VIII wouldn't tolerate that, is that a true sovereignty or a person that is truly responsible within a sovereign would tax these tech companies that brought about because, and this is why they were taxing, they did not build the infrastructure in which they built, in which they make their money from. They didn't build these computers. They didn't build the networking. These were built by people who worked government jobs, who were trying to do their best to create an intra network to help the defense of the United States fight the Cold War. These things, these technologies were made public and they were commercialized. So going back to how these people aren't being tough on Zuckerberg, who sucks, Elon sucks, and all the rest of them, big tech is a big lie because it does not deliver on its promises. More importantly, it does not give back to the tax base and the people in which it deprives and use and sell as a commodity and literally treat like, I ain't gonna lie to you, sometimes using these apps, I feel like I'm in a rehab clinic because I gotta be aware of my notifications. I gotta be aware of how long I'm on here.
Cookies.
I gotta be aware of the cookies. And I just went to a website, and then Instagram is so goddamn pervasive. It's at the point where I feel like they inside of Apple encryption and they read my cookies that I send to y'all about other things. It's like, how the hell did this come up here?
No, they definitely.
I was like, okay, so you inside of Apple's encryption. That's nice. That's cool. You read my phone.
Is it a fee? You think it's a fee to get inside of it? For Instagram to get inside of it? Like the way we text and then you text about something?
I wouldn't think it's a fee because Instagram wouldn't want to pay. Facebook wouldn't want to pay Apple. They wouldn't want to pay. They cheap people. Again, they thugs.
They cheap, but
They're
they
thugs.
cheap, but the money on the back end though.
They thugs. Thugs don't pay for shit. They don't want to pay. If I'm Mark Zuckerberg, you think I really want to pay Tim Cook?
But I'll pay Tim Cook $10 to make 1,000.
Nah, I'm not doing that.
Shit.
When you a monster,
A million times over.
I'll say that's more
Because the people don't care.
That's a reasonable. That's an honest person. That's an honest thug. Nah, son. We got people who are acquiring companies. Let's look at these joints as they really are. There is no innovation in Silicon Valley because the big people are buying up the little people. And if everything is coming into acquisitions and people are acquiring, we haven't even talked about the corporate debt. We want to talk about Main Street. We love talking about Main Street. We love talking about how the average person is in debt and how much the average person is in debt. We don't talk about how these corporations.
What's America's FICO score?
you know, if we get downgraded in our credit, they gonna shoot our ass.
It's gonna be automatic war.
It's like,
let's go. It's mob time.
You mean to tell me I got bad credit?
That's why I know it's about to be war time though, because we got bad credit.
To answer you, we got horrible credit. To answer your question about politicians, the politicians don't want to do their due diligence and tax these corporations because, as I was saying, most people don't understand a revolving door when you swear an oath. These politicians are believing that they're going to eventually get a job in tech and then they're going to be able to take advantage of the policies that they put forth afterwards. But what these politicians are not understanding, when we go back to the Gilded Ages and the Gilded Sages, we are at a point in which the calcification of wealth is in which people are relying on the credentialization of their children. That's when we get to the lawnmower parents, the helicopter parents, is that if you don't have a certain level of credentials and you don't have certain extracurriculars, you're not getting that job. So there's opportunity hoarding. We don't talk about the endogamy, marrying within your class, the endogamy practices. We don't look at how Charlemagne, I'm not talking about Charlemagne the God, you a joke. I'm talking about Charlemagne the king who brought the French and Germans together, who's considered the modern father of Europe. How Charlemagne himself as a king was just considered one of the folks. Like you a king, but you like a warrior king. We don't talk about how most people act like they're King Richard II, one of the first kings to say, call me your highness. We don't talk about that. So we don't talk about how these tech companies are putting themselves and exalting themselves above the people without understanding how much they are depleting the people, without restoring the people. And we have politicians, again, who are forgoing taking care of the people for taking care of themselves when they transition over. And that's the problem. And what I think is going to happen is that global competition amongst the elites is going to force the elites to have to compete. Because the kids are stupid.
This is true.
I'm just telling you, just because you born to an affluent family don't mean you smart.
You know, most affluent people, most elite people, like poor people, because especially the ones who come from and having to have security by actually doing work, their kids are just spoiled. And it's like, oh my God.
They don't have emotional toughness.
Like, yeah, these niggas suck. But no, I endorse those comments in terms of
I'm gonna get in trouble.
It's fuck it. Hey, in the end, we the boogeyman anyway. We black men. Fuck it. Like raw.
You got a problem. You take the crust out your eye. Shit. For Brianna Taylor Genie, you take the crust out her eye. They're like boom, 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 boom. Like damn.
Hey, but you know what? It's so crazy though that with all of that being said, like I agree 100% in terms of I think it's disgusting how people are foregoing holding larger institutions accountable and then putting that weight on the electorate to undergird failed politicians and failed governments, and nobody really wants to have the conversation about. I would say it's a failed republic because I don't ever believe it was a democracy.
It was never a republic. We're based on Rome. But okay.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I was having a conversation with somebody. He was talking about Rome, and it was interesting that somebody was doing something based off of Roman ideals, and I was like, damn, well, there goes something else. Y'all want to be Rome so bad, and we about to fall just the same way Rome fell. It's so interesting. But back to tech. Back to tech. That was a lot said.
I went on a rant.
No, I love the rant because I think it goes to a lot of different issues when we talk about tech and when we talk about how tech came about. Because I don't think we talk about that transition that America went into in terms of the digital age and who was left out of that transition and how we got into that. Like last video, again, if you can, first off, like the video, man, share the video, comment if you can. We're trying to have a discussion. We're trying to have a very productive discussion, not with the, slut talk about what person doing this in their household. We really trying to have, productive conversations about society and how do we move forward? Because I don't have all of the answers.
I don't.
Again, if you go back and you watch all our videos, some answers I do have. Some I do have. And I need y'all on board with them jumps. But on tech, I do not have the answer. I have been watching what's going on. It is crazy. I did watch The Social Dilemma. Great, great, great watch. If you haven't watched that, it's on Netflix. Go check it out. It is about the weaponization of it. And as a political person, I loved watching it because it showed how, again, things are weaponized against people, and going to your point and talking about how the infrastructures have been co-opted and how the algorithms of behavior and the studying and the commodification of the data and the commodification of the studies and how those studies of taking what people are prone to do and been weaponized against the very people, which is why I do agree with what you said in that, no, they are disgusting. But that whole nother conversation about, how they don't want to listen to us because we niggas and we darkness. If my fathers was white, they'd be sucking it instead of talking about us basing at them. Because again, Mark Zuckerberg is, whether you like it or not, hailed as a lovable figure.
Brilliant. Although he doesn't like people. I'm listening.
Elon Musk,
Elon sucks.
all of them, and it's just interesting to watch it kind of play out as there isn't really any real oversight outside of it. Because again, would you say would you throw Amazon in that tech conversation?
Absolutely. But here's one thing what people got to understand on Amazon.
Because I've been there. Amazon is like
Bezos, he is of the age group of Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, meaning that he understands the real world infrastructure.
Definitely.
And so that's why he's competing with Brown UPS and why he's competing with FedEx. Because in DHL, he understands digital and the real world. That's why Zuckerberg is Bezos' bitch. I'll put it that way. If you put Zuckerberg and Bezos in the same room, I got Bezos 100 out of 100 times. Because he can just outthink Zuckerberg. He can literally outthink Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
You can see
that's an age and all that too.
You can see it. Like when you see Zuckerberg sit there and he's talking to senators and everything else, it's like, I know your lawyers grilled you. I know they grilled you. Why are you pausing and delaying? You should be able to go back and forth with these senators. Why aren't you able to go back and forth with these senators? You don't know your business as well as you think you do. And anybody go, well, he knows his business. He just ain't gonna tell anybody. If you know your business well enough, you're able to sell your business to anybody.
On both sides.
On both sides. You can sell it to anyone. Hove does it. On the Black Album, Hove talked about what we talking about. Like, I'm on their ass, and he's talking about how white people don't want to admit that he's on their ass, and how he doesn't do the ads, and so they get mad at him because he doesn't want to do the interviews and the ads. Yeah, I'm talking about the Black Album. It's old, but Hove gave y'all game.
It's still relevant.
It's still relevant. Hove gives you all game about how corporate deals and corporate America work, and y'all just look at him for the drug dealing and everything else, and the Beyonce. It's like, no. And I rock with a Vet Carnell every once in a while. You rock with a Vet Carnell, I don't know to what extent.
Nah, I fuck with your Vet Carnell.
Yeah. And to
political, hey, she talks down, consistent.
She talks about him and how he isn't necessarily that brilliant, but it's like, he's brilliant when it comes down to making these deals. Mm-hmm. He knows how to make a deal in hostile territory. NFL, he made a deal. Music title, he made a deal. You got to give people where they have their acumen. He makes hard, tough deals, and he's able to spin them in a way in which those who aren't that sophisticated or who have a level of sophistication are willing to go along with what he's willing to do. It takes a lot for someone to get that credibility in that buy-in, not just from white audiences, but also Black audiences.
And this is where I understand both sides, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I can remove the moral implications and the duplicitousness from critiquing a person. Mm-hmm. Because where Yvette Carnell comes in with it, and where I appreciate her, and where she safeguards and understands politics on another level that most people don't, is she understands why remaining consistent is super important.
It's always important.
Because where I can say I rock with her because she critiques in a way that is like, nah, kudos to Jay-Z. Because like you said, she understands that like, nah, what he doing is I can congratulate you on it. And it's kudos because you are playing the game that is installed, that the program that is in place. All well, which is why I understand that you are quote unquote part of the problem and why I'm not going to respect you when you call out white supremacy or like what Kanye is doing right now and trying to use, the boogeyman, my contracts is bad. No, shut up, bro.
Mm-hmm.
You long threw that away.
Mm-hmm.
It's valid.
Side out of your ass long before you took the pictures on Twitter.
And Hit Boy.
Hit
Boy just outed him. Like, bro, you can't talk because you're doing the same thing to everybody else. And so it's like, I need you to be consistent. More than anything else, I need you to be consistent. And I think Jay-Z is consistent in that way, in the fact that he shields critique in terms of he is who he is. And this is where, choosing sides comes down to it. It's like, you chose your side, bro. I can respect that. I respect anybody for choosing a side.
Mm-hmm.
That takes more heart than anything. Because a lot of the problem is coming down to, again, when you talk about the Mark Zuckerbergs and the Elon Sucks and all of them.
Thank you.
I can respect it. You want to know why? They chose their side, bro. They chose. They live in what they live in.
That's what makes them thugs.
They accept it.
The thugs.
And that's man code. What I don't appreciate is the duplicit people who want to come and say, oh, I made a deal with Zuckerberg. The Fortnite. I don't know if you saw that Fortnite is suing Apple for basically not making their platform accessible, and because they got removed from the platform because Fortnite is also being sued because they have a bunch of license issues. When you talk about the Travis Scott and how they use their model. And so a Fortnite is a person that I wouldn't respect because now they are out here, oh, I'm trying to represent the little guy. No, you raped the little guy. You brought people into your platform unwillingly without signing contracts, using people's likeness without signing contracts. And I'm glad because they're also in that tech boom and going about it in an unscrupulous way, but where I would have a respect for and to be consistent and to help people if you aren't necessarily in the tech world and you are in the political world. The analogy that I would use is I respect Joe Biden. I respect him because he's consistent even though he's disgusting. I don't respect Bernie Sanders, even though I like Bernie Sanders' platform better. And I don't respect Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders is duplicitous. See, well, Bernie Sanders will talk all of that garbage about being a fake white hope, but then go out and campaign in place of Joe. He's doing more campaign than Joe Biden doing. I don't respect you, bro. You cool, but you're fake. I'd rather deal with the savage that says that, nah, I am who I am. We gonna do what we gonna do. And that's the same way with tech. That's the same way with Jay-Z. And that's the same thing in terms of all of these things. And I posted today, can people just accept what we're seeing? Because I think part of the problem is when we're talking about tech is that people aren't accepting that even though automation is convenient, automation has its cons on the other end. Because when we talk about the level of access that African Americans have into the marketplace, in the economy, into the workforce, which has been consistent, abysmally consistent throughout American history, we are going to be the first to be displaced. We saw in COVID that we're the first to get fired, the last to get hired. With the automation of technology, you just get more fired. My biggest thing is just always how do we get people to move into the next article? How do we get people to really accept what we're in right now in terms of the transition in what you call the fourth industrial revolution? And how do we navigate that as a group? And what I'm about to pop up now for everybody this is the article from The Atlantic. It's called the tech companies that already won. And I'll just read a little bit off the top too, because it goes into this guy. He's talking about his home life. He says, I watch our younger daughter while my wife works and then we swap. I cheat, though letting my daughter watch Amazon Prime Video on her iPad while I slack on mine. Everywhere in the house, the pandemic takes things away and technology offers recompense. My son, a recent college graduate, works upstairs doing digital marketing on Facebook. My older daughter attends college on Zoom from her bedroom. We just replaced her pink childhood bed with the queen. Amazon delivered the mattress, which it also manufactured. The fusion of technologies rule and the pandemic's chaos felt particularly poignant yesterday as the House Judiciary Committee on Antitrust Bureau, Amazon's Jeff Bezos, Apple's Tim Cook, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, and Google's Sundar Pichai, I believe is his name.
CEO.
Yeah, the proceedings started an hour late, and the four CEOs all appeared virtually. So I'm gonna skip down to what I took from this. Right, their influence cannot be denied. The technological underpinnings of ordinary life during the pandemic are impossible to avoid, in part because this crisis has made the tech industry only more ubiquitous. By the time the antitrust testimony finally started, I was able to relocate from the kitchen iPad to the office computer. But my younger daughter had begun her piano lesson outside the door via Zoom, of course, on another iPad we bought from Tim Cook. I joined last minute video meeting at my university too while watching the antitrust hearing while comparing notes about in Slack with my Atlantic colleagues. It feels quaint to call this multitasking, an outmoded walk and chew gum euphemism for the desperate. As you know, I hate that saying. Computerized constancy of the daily life. The pandemic is inescapable, but so is tech. Antitrust law is supposed to ensure market competition, and the technology sector is a worthy target for its intervention. It pervades every crevice of ordinary life. All business is tech business. Banking is computers doing finance. Automobiles are computers spinning drivetrains. Retailers are warehouse pick and pack computers connected to freight logistics routing computers. In his opening statement at the hearing, Representative Jen Seisenbrenner of Wisconsin emphasized the need to conduct oversight of big tech. But he also praised tech companies whose CEOs was addressing. And we kind of talked about this already in terms of the lack of oversight based on the revolving door and people and elected officials wanting to acquiesce, for lack of a better word, to the tech industry because the tech industry has that much reach and it has that influence, and because the tech industry is becoming the terrain of how we are going to navigate. And so it goes back to the question is, how do we have a real antitrust conversation? Because people talk bad about Trump, but I don't see Biden weak ass having a real conversation about antitrust around tech, or neither Kamala Harris around this as well. So in the case that they don't, what do we do as average everyday people who, again, when we have reports out, because this is after the reports came out where we have Apple, not only Apple, Amazon, both being reported, having people come in as under the guise of being incubators, taking those innovations, running with those innovations, understanding that the smaller guy doesn't have the legal capacity, economic capacity, or the political influence, any of those things to be able to challenge them.
Got you. In my head, I was thinking Toys R Us kids jingle. We have to be those people. We have to be Steve Jobs. We have to be Bill Gates. Not Mark Zuckerberg. Not Elon Sucks. Because a lot of people don't know Elon Sucks did not develop the Tesla. He was just a marketing person. What I mean is that...
Who was it, Edison?
No, it wasn't Edison. Nikola Tesla is the actual person who worked for Thomas Edison, and Thomas Edison was stealing everybody's copyright.
Gotcha.
So Tesla was like, I'm actually smarter than you, dude. I'm leaving. We have to create the competition. We have to be the competition. This is where Gen Xers and their hubris makes me laugh. It's like those baby boomers, they left you a broken down, run down 19th century, I should say, 19th century estate house. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's not my problem. Google it. Alphabet will help you. And I'm not being snarky, but I am at the point of, if you're willing to kiss a CEO's behind for impressions and not a job, you don't get how important, and I know how, don't think it's lost on me, the irony of using Apple products and using tech products to bring this message. The Social Dilemma talked about it. But that goes back to even to the Atlantic. How else am I going to get the message to you? If I knock on your door, you probably call the CDC on me. How else am I going to get the message to you? We have to accept, and this is what I mean by technology. Technology is so transformative that it changes our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And tech has changed our life. And then, yeah, I call them thugs, and yes, I call them drug dealers. That's what you're doing. But you, as a consumer, have to go like, I'm going to put down my phone. You, as a parent who, hey, I'm born 1990, so if you are a parent and you were born before 1996, where they mark off people born and raised and introduced to social media as teens, you should be able to tell your kids that at a certain age, people just kind of don't give a damn about anybody. You should be able to tell your kids, like, people are kind of selfish creatures.
Point blank, period.
So,
especially in America.
Especially in America. It's like when everyone is told they're going to be successful and it's all about a dog-eat-dog world and look to your left and look to your right, one of you won't be here and all that other kind of very, I don't want to call it nasty because it's not nasty. It's not even cynical because cynicism is honest. Like the Social Dilemma talks about, the manipulation. It's like we have to get beyond the manipulation of tech into the honesty of tech. We have to get beyond the recommendation algorithm constantly pushing people to the top and suppressing people at the bottom. We got to get to the point where, when you were talking about with Apple and them coming and bringing in people from incubators, we need those people who are the talented people to no longer decide, well, I'm going to work for Apple, I'm going to work for Google, and this is going to be an example of how powerful I am or how intellectual I am, and get to a space and going like, I am an intellectual and I am intelligent because I decided to be intellectual and intelligent and put in the due diligence. There is no certain amount of income. There's no certain amount of anything that can dictate my intelligence outside of my effort. And being intelligent does not always mean that you know the best thing. Sometimes the most intelligent thing to do is go, help! I don't get it! I don't understand! Somebody help me! And that's one of the most intelligent things you can do. Is when exactly when you know you out your depth, you're like, that shit ain't for me. It ain't for me. But when you talked about the senator, we have to get back to real honest communal conversations. Because we know that California has pushed it that Lyft and Uber recognize their drivers as employees. And when you do that, that high profit margin that these tech companies need it gets cut because they need this high profit margin, because we don't talk about how these people just they just rob Wall Street. It's like, what's Wall Street for real? Not like how Joe Budden talks about this. Wall Street is basically, yo, I got this company, right? I need you to give me a little bit of share. Even, what's his name? Mark Cuban talks about how shares doesn't mean you really own a company. You don't own a company. And then Capital talks about how most capital is just going in a circle, spinning around, buying and sharing to the same people.
It's currency. It's fluid.
It has to move. We got to get down to people saying that this financial economy in which these tech companies really run on, stock options and all these other things, are having a huge impact on our housing, like in Seattle when you talk about Microsoft, on housing in Silicon Valley, on housing in New York. They call it the fire nationalization of things.
Because Silicon Valley is in San Francisco, right?
No, it's in Southern California.
Southern Cal?
Yeah. San Francisco is Northern California.
But do you think it's any correlation in terms of the housing prices and the gentrification?
Yeah. Because how they compensate people. Like, people go like, okay, Jeff Bezos, he's worth this umpteen billions. It's like, on paper. And maybe in the assets that he has accumulated in the real world. Other than that, that's based on stock prices, bro. That's based upon trading. Like, these billions upon billions of dollars that people are talking about is like, after a certain amount of money, you cannot, as a person, fathom spending $1 million a year on yourself. Imagine just spending $1 million a year on yourself.
Okay.
People do it. Oh, that's a car. That's this and that. It's like, bro, for how many years do you have to spend $1 million on yourself? And this person is a billionaire. So they can spend, and they don't have to earn no other money, barring taxes and everything else, barring inflation. This is just a pure thought experiment. $1 billion is 1,000 million. That's what $1 billion is. If you are at $999 million, you're just a millionaire. You're not a billionaire. You gotta get to that 1,000 million. This person has 1,000 million. So even if they lived out their entire natural life and spent $1 million a year, they cannot spend all of that money if they spent $1 million a year. And after you get to a certain point in a certain age, I'm only 30, but it's like, yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm tired of this. I don't want none of this shit. Like, somebody create something new. I need something new. But my whole point is getting back to your point about how do we stop it. We take on our own agency as consumers. People need to really understand their power as a consumer. As a consumer, you have the power to say, this is not serving me. As a consumer, you have the power to say, this isn't benefiting me. And that's when the electorate comes in, because everybody, I don't care if you're a king, queen, and then go back to Watch the Throne, was a king to a god, was a god to a non-believer who doesn't believe in anything. You have to appeal to me. If you're not appealing to me, then why am I paying attention to you? If I already know I'm going to be hungry, if I already know that I'm going to be starved, if I already know that there's none of these things that are going to benefit me, well, damn, why don't I just mob on you?
Mm-hmm.
And people don't think that's true. It's like, no, revolutions happen all the time. The women in France marched on the Tuileries Gardens because they couldn't afford to fish in the market. When people go hungry, their minds chemically change. I don't like sensationalism, but this isn't sensationalism.
It's not sensationalism, though.
This is historical fact.
We come from an environment that when people go hungry, and that's my biggest thing.
Survival
kicks
come
in. From it. I understand the mind of being a survivor.
Survival kicks in. That shit's a monster.
Like, and people, again, because you know me.
People stay stuck in survival.
I think I speak in hyperbole. It's like
real.
No, look. A lot of y'all show y'all privilege when you don't understand.
It's real.
This shit can get real dicey.
Real quick.
because once things start collapsing, and when we talk about housing insecurity and food insecurity, all these different types of
Food
insecurities,
insecurity? Ooh.
those very core things, nothing matters anymore.
Right and wrong goes out the window. What's right allows me to survive.
And that's what it comes down to. While everybody's watching, what I want everybody to do is, if you still watching, like the video, share, comment. I'm on Facebook trying to track comments, as well as YouTube trying to see the comments from everybody.
Oh, we got people engaging and interacting?
Yeah.
What? Y'all here with us?
So
I thought I was just talking shit to me.
Nah. We got our brother Quan in here.
What's up, Quan?
And then we got our guy Zimba G cueing his spitting. Miss Simmons, it takes money to make money. And so, let me see. Do I have the link to drop in here?
Are we going to get some call-ins?
I want to do call-ins. I like doing call-ins.
I want to hear your voice.
I like being able to have discussions. And I want to thank everybody for joining us today.
Yes.
What is this? Taylor Auto?
I thought we was rapping to ourselves. That's funny. Thank y'all for being here. I really appreciate that.
It's just, we don't got our brother Quan here.
Quan the poet.
And
he had
having a conversation. You be in the zone.
I be rapping, son. I don't mean no disrespect, but if you feel disrespected, not my problem.
This junk, man.
Because it's real. I'm thinking about kids. I'm not thinking about me no more. Like, I don't care what nobody says.
No, that's facts, though.
Once you get to a certain point in life, you're like, I done done my dumb shit. I done me. Now it's time for me to be responsible enough to allow another generation at least have the fun of fucking up. That's part of growing up. Part of growing up is having a space to fuck up.
Because in the end, what happens is it ain't about us at this point.
Not at all.
Like, Slim, the world 10 years out, 20 years out, we got to be thinking about everybody else. And a lot of people still on this selfish note, like, look, I'm living for my son. Because in the end, I can do everything and make all these selfish moves, but we also have covered and went over the fact that 70% of African American people within their social class drop one. Come on, man, you setting your kid up for failure. I'm trying to find this.
What they talking about? The face of the book of the face.
Facebook don't got as many comments as the YouTube.
Tubes that are you?
Yeah, but the actual deets are in that. Let me see. Copy invitation. Let me copy the invitation and see if I can drop it in here. Turn down this.
Turn down for what?
Turn down for what? Who's saying that? Don't.
I know it was Little John in that joint.
Boom.
This whole argument.
And so this is the actual Zoom link. Anybody want to join in? Did it come in? Yep, it went in. So let me see.
Black entertainers kind of tell you how Black America is doing. Because they love to shit on us. And when they can't do that, they know they broke.
Live chat. Look at here. There you go. There you go. Oh no, I think I only had 200. All these character limits, they kill me with these jumps. Goddamn character limits. Sheesh. Can you let me live?
No, I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to do that because I would love to have a diversity of marketplaces to force them to compete with each other. That's how you get better pricing as a consumer. That's how you get better at service as a consumer. That's how you get better options as a consumer. Is forcing these brands to recognize that they do not own you. You come to them. They don't own you. And when people really take on that ownership of like, excuse me, Facebook, but I have a right to my digital data. Excuse me, Alphabet, but I have a right to my digital data. Excuse me, advertiser, I don't want to buy your boring shit because it's boring.
So I just dropped that in the chat. If anybody wants to call in, I got everything still up. And we got the breakout rooms. What it do, Quan? 8:52. Let's see. Do we have any participants? What's the ground?
He hungry.
What y'all got to eat, man? I'm starving.
See, the camera's on. You know, non-camera me was about to come out. He was like, I'm about to be quiet. It's sweet Saturday. The camera's on. You ain't gonna hot mic me. You can't hot mic me. I'm too slick with
do
it.
that.
What, somebody about to call in?
Quan said he was about to see if he can call in.
Do that, please.
How's everything otherwise, though, man?
You know I've been getting in trouble.
I said I had some boneless chicken wings yesterday. Them joints was good.
I've been trying to try some vegan joints.
Oh no, the vegan joints clutch, bro.
I don't know. Cause you know me, I'm picky, son.
What, the vegan chicken?
Yeah. It has to feel like chicken. That's me. My body is like, yeah, this isn't real.
No,
This
it's definitely great options out here. It's definitely great options. I can find you great options. I got vegan meatballs, vegan chicken, all of it.
So if you got vegan chicken, I want vegan chicken with vegetables.
All of it.
I gotta have the vegetables
I do
on
all
top
of
of it.
I do all that.
I
I make we make vegan nachos. I got vegan breadcrumbs.
I want my cheese. I ain't gonna lie to you. My cheese kind of makes me feel good.
Oh yeah. Hold on. My man Quan is in the building. I need you to cam up, bro. Need you to cam up, fam. Hello? Can you hear me? Yes, sir.
You on his phone, so he may not be able to. What you call it? He talking though.
I can't hear.
We was in technical difficulties, but we ain't tech people, so goddamn it. You got his mic mute. So.
Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
You
Okay.
are in the building, and I'm gonna ask you to. Can you cam up?
Let me see. Let me see.
Thank you, kind sir. What you gotta say, man? Hold on. Hold on. You went back on mute.
Unmute.
There you
Okay.
go.
Yeah, I really love the discussion, man. Y'all really got in, especially when it comes to like a lot of these CEOs robbing, man. For real, like that whole piece about how they go about pretty much taking data and just the thuggery of the way in which they move within the technology space. It's like no other industry ever in America. Like there was regulation throughout everything. Like even the billionaires of the past got busted up
It is.
when they got out of control. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? The Carnegies, the Rockefellers, all of those people, they when they got too large, they got busted up. Even the telephone companies,
Mm-hmm.
the antitrust laws. And it's like
Definitely.
I'll I'll you know what I mean? We don't have enough political pressure on these companies to do what was done in the past because you're seeing the past repeat itself. You know what I mean? It happened in telecommunications.
And so
Well,
let me
now
ask
it's
you.
being reversed.
Let me ask you this. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So we just talked about how tech not only is it running rampant in the sense that it doesn't have any checks and balances on it. What did you want to add anything in terms of how it has created this disposition for the African American ADOS community in terms of the automation of tech and how it will whether it be I can't speak to whether it be intentionally or unintentionally, but it phasing out jobs not only for us but for Americans as a whole, given the outsourcing as well.
So one of the things that I feel people have people, and it's so unfortunate because, like, take cell phones for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Cell phones at one point were only used as a business in a business manner. When you had the BlackBerry, those were only professionals, and those apps that were on those were productivity apps. You never used that technology outside of business transactions and whatever that productivity app was for.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you integrate all of these different things into it, the productivity aspect is not lost because those apps still exist. It's just we're not equipped to use those productivity apps and those things that everyone else was used to. That business class of the early 2000s, the late 90s, the early 2000s, those people were used to using those productivity apps as a part of their day-to-day transactions. With black people, we came along within technology through a Facebook, through a social media app. We saw the entertainment side of a lot of these different platforms and different softwares, whereas the professional class, even though they use the same similar things, they were trained in a way to use it from a productivity standpoint.
I
Some
agree.
professionals had both a BlackBerry for strictly their productivity, their work, and they had a regular cell phone that was strictly for family and those types of things. So they're used to that degree of separation. So they'll be able to integrate into society better because they have been trained throughout the years to have that natural divide. Whereas someone like us, unfortunately, ADOS,
Mm-hmm.
my first transaction with technology in a phone was through social media. We went to college. Facebook was the first thing. You know what I mean? You had to have a college email in order to get a Facebook.
This is true.
You know what I'm saying? So that was our introduction to these platforms versus the professional class who had always known to keep those two things separate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be a hard ask, but I think people are going to have to begin to understand and be able to separate the two the way a lot of other people learned how to separate the two. I don't think that's going to solve it, but I think that has to be relearned as a part of beginning to start the ball rolling on how we unlearn some of the things that we've unfortunately learned through social media and through algorithms and through this just being a day-to-day thing.
Hmm. So earlier I mentioned, I don't know if you were watching at this point, but I had mentioned in terms of myself, I don't necessarily see it play out in a favorable way in terms of how people communicate with it, and I just want to
Mhm.
hear your thoughts. And I hear everything that you're saying, and it definitely makes sense in terms of like the unlearning part and being able to reprogram ourselves, but in given the full context of the society and everything is playing out, and like the last article that we read from the Atlantic talking about how the tech being unavoidable and how entrenched it is in our lives, do you see that trajectory or that reprogramming or that willingness to reprogram happening?
Um, Unfortunately, not as of now. But to be honest with you, it's going to be the leading thing towards us being able to survive moving forward. Because as technology begins to integrate, if we're not able to engage technology in a way where we can both be productive and still, engage it in the ways that we're used to for entertainment value, because what we're looking at is, like I put in the chat, you're going to have to also become what's called a digital citizen.
Hmm,
So you have your regular citizenship, the responsibilities that you have as a regular citizen, but
interesting.
you also have the responsibility of a digital citizen, which is learning how to engage these algorithms and these digital platforms in a way that's beneficial to you and the collective. So I don't necessarily know how you start to do that large scale because so much has happened within the short amount of time. Like when you think about years from 20 to 30, technology has, quadruple past our concepts of what we've grown up with technology to be. You know what I mean? No other generation has grown up with the amount of technological advances as we have. Generally speaking, most generations before us grew up in similar backgrounds with slight
Hmm.
changes here and there. Versus
Gotcha.
our generation, when you look at, because I've been in the school system for 10 years. When I look at how I was educated versus just the children now in a span of 10 years, I wouldn't have imagined, you know what I mean, us having to educate kids in the ways that we are. And that just goes to show how fast technology has advanced in just the span of a decade. You know what I mean? A lot hasn't happened. Like when you think of our age, from the time we were born to about 20.
Hold on. So are you saying the technology is outpacing us
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
in
That's
terms of
exactly what I'm saying.
what, our cognitive skills, or just in general?
I'm saying it's outpacing us in terms of our ability to adapt to the realities that technology has brought about. So, like I was saying, from the time we were born to about 20, you didn't see vast changes in the ways in which technology really communicated through us. You know what I mean? Take video games, for instance. You can turn a video game on and off whenever you wanted to. Nowadays, you can literally say to the game, turn off, and you don't know for a fact that it's turned off. It could be still on in a certain capacity, and it could still be tracking data. Like, these are realities that are baked into a lot of different things that we just aren't aware of.
Yeah,
We
this is
aren't aware of it.
because I was reading an article one time about how the TVs pick up a lot of the data and information. The smart TVs pick up a lot of data and information in the standby state, and how that information was being sold to politicos and other, Silicon Valley competitors.
Exactly. So it's so much that we just have no information about because it's not public, and no idea of what goes on behind the scenes. And part of it, that information needs to become public, and we have to begin to adapt and learn the value of our data, our searches, what we spend our time on. You know what I mean? Learning the productivity applications behind the things that we use. So, like, for example, an Instagram. A lot of people use Instagram, but what they don't know is if you make your page a business page, you get all of the productivity applications and the algorithms behind what you post
The
to
insights.
make yourself more efficient. But if you don't engage that type of stuff, you get left behind when it becomes a requirement, which is what Instagram is doing now.
Hmm. In terms of, and when you say what Instagram is doing now, what are you speaking to?
In terms of, you're not able to get as much visibility unless you have an understanding of the key not statistics, but the key metrics behind what it is that you're doing in terms of when you post, uh, how much engagement you get, how much reach something has. These are all things that are baked into a lot of these different algorithms that we engage in. But if you don't understand that as a business, or you don't have that level of sophistication to understand what certain graphs mean, certain charts mean,
Mm-hmm.
then you just won't be able to compete in a digital level. And that's what we're facing.
Agreed.
That's
And,
what we're facing.
and so, with that being said, I appreciate you for calling in, kind sir.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
We
yeah,
love
for
to have
sure. I would love to be there, but duty calls.
understood. So I'm gonna let you go for right now. I'm gonna wait to see if we get any calls, but thank you for the conversation. We definitely gonna pick up next weekend. Let me see. Thank you for helping me, because now I get to see that it actually works.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Um,
yeah, for sure, for sure, for sure. But I'm gonna go ahead and let y'all go, man.
all
All
right, I'm gonna
right.
put you
Thank you.
back in the waiting room.
You got somebody to wait for you?
No, I'm gonna
Oh.
put them back in the waiting room because it allows the waiting room, and you add people. So if the queue build up,
You know.
could let people in. But with that being said, for one more time, if you still with us, I want to thank you. I want to say I love you, appreciate you for having a conversation, for coming over here on your Saturday night, and like the video, share, leave a comment.
Email us.
Email us as well. It's gildedsages at gmail.com. I'm trying to get that fixed so they can just be a gildedsages.com situation. But again, man, we appreciate y'all for coming out on another Saturday, enjoying us, supporting us. We really do appreciate it. We really appreciate y'all engaging in the conversations. So with that being said, I want everybody to enjoy the rest of their evening. Enjoy your family, your food, your drinks, whatever you're doing right now. Be safe, stay COVID free. And just when you're moving, when you're navigating, just think about all of the implications and everything that go into it. And we will catch you all next time, next week. And again, thank you. Much love. And we will see you all next time.